Poboy Special here, and I'm going to tell you why you should consider making wax slugs and the most economical way to go about it. Coming right up. Alright, first let me tell you why, the importance of why you should consider making wax slugs. Because I have here a regular slug. This is factory, straight from the box from the manufacturer, and it is a 1 ounce slug, copper coated, and this is very good, but it's very expensive right now. And when I mean expensive at the time of this filming, it's about $2 a round. That's right, $2 for one shot here. That's really expensive. Now the effects of a slug are very tremendous and very heavy projectile. Kinetic energy is awesome, but one major consideration of a real slug is penetration. It gets excellent penetration, but to the point of over penetration. So here is the reason for the wax slug. And what the wax slug does or is you take some sort of wax, and I'm going to use the word wax as a generic term, meaning every medium that we have. So wax could come from a candle, a paraffin, crayon, glue, hot glue, caulking. So we're just going to say wax to mean all of this. So what you do is you open up your shell, and I've already opened this one up. Pour out the shot, which I did, and you can see the shot here. Then you take your medium, whichever one you prefer, and I'll go over which one here in a minute. I'm just telling you the why of a wax slug. Once you make one of these mediums into a liquid form, you start pouring it back into your shell, and you start pouring the shot back in, and then when you get to the fill level, you close it back up. Then you let it cool and solidify and harden, and then it becomes a slug. Now it doesn't become a lead slug or a very solid metal slug like this one, but it does become a solid form. Now the reason that the wax slug should be considered is because of, remember when I said this has the over penetration ability, whereas now the wax slug does not. It penetrates, and when it hits something soft tissue, the damage is horrendous. And when I say horrendous, I mean it is holy cow. Now you're not going to get a lot of penetration, but my goodness, the damage is just incomparable. So what it does, it comes out of the case as a slug, as one solid piece. Then when it hits something soft, it breaks apart, and all those little bitty pieces of shot just go poosh. So when you're looking at it for like home defense or self-defense, and you are worried about over penetration, say through drywall or whatever, this is a very good option, because it's not going to go past that drywall very far, and it's just going to open up and lose all its energy. And on a soft target, you're probably going to get 6, maybe 8 inches of penetration, depending on the distance that you shoot it from. And man, the damage is going to be huge. It's just going to be huge. Now, I will say, yes, that out of a regular 1 ounce slug, and this is high brass, and I'm using low brass on this. And I don't know if you can see the difference, but see the distance between here and here, that's very high, whereas this one is very low. That's why they call it low brass. That's why they call that one high brass. High brass is usually for your slugs and double-aught buck. low brass for your bird and field loads. I'm using bird and field loads because these shells are relatively inexpensive compared to this high brass. Now you can make high brass wax slugs, but you have to be careful on the medium that you use to make sure that it will hold up and stay together as a slug because of the higher pressure. Now I'm using low brass because I know that these mediums will withstand low brass pressures, and I know that with the wax slug you're going to get 30, 40, maybe 50 yards accuracy. These I know have a whole lot better accuracy. You can shoot 100, 120 yards, maybe 150 yards, 100 yards all day long with pretty good accuracy. I understand that, and it is high brass. So here's why to make wax slugs out of low brass. This is very inexpensive compared to the double-aught buck or slug. So this is a whole lot, and you can find it easier, less expensive, and you can make wax slugs with it. Now the damage that you will get with a wax slug is tremendous, and you don't have to worry about over penetration. So that's why you should consider wax slugs, because you may not be able to find these later on, and they may be very, very, very expensive, whereas these you can find pretty much anywhere, and they're a whole lot less expensive, and you can make your own wax slugs. So how do you do it? What's the most expensive way to make a wax slug? Let me tell you. Alright, here's how you go about it. You will need, the tools you will need are some sort of carpet knife, box cutter knife, whatever you want to call it, and you will need a pair of needle nose pliers. And you can do this one of two ways, and I'll tell you which way I prefer, but I'm going to give you the pros and cons of each way. The first way you'll see in my dish here is, this is where you're going to need the needle nose pliers. You'll take your box cutter, and you will see there's serrations in here, and you gently go in here and you pry up until you get that lip to come up. And when you get that lip to come up, you take your needle nose pliers and you pull up and pull back, pull back, pull back until it opens up like this. Once you get it open, then all you do is you just take a container and pour out the shot and save this. You will need this later unless you're not going to use it. So that's one way, where you just pry it open, and you can see how I've pried it with needle nose pliers and just peeled it back. That's one way. The second way is you take your knife and you score the rim, the top rim of the round. And what I mean by that is, you be very, very careful. Do not try this at home. You run your blade like this, and you turn the round like this, and you're cutting this little top off like this. And what it does in effect then is, I went ahead and done these. What you're doing is you're cutting the top off like that, and the whole top will come off. And once you have that top off, once again, take your dish, pour out all the shot, and now you have a nice open round without a top. If you want to use this later on, you can, to put it back on. If not, alright. Why the two different methods? Depending on which one you find easier to do, and depending on how you like to load your rounds once they're finished. What I mean by that is, obviously which one is easier for you, I get that. If you want to worry about loading these back up in the tube of your shotgun, then you may want to do it this way and crimp it back just like it looked before we started. If that's not really a concern, then an open top is just fine. And you'll just fill it equal to here and just load it in the tube, and it's going to have a flat top, and it's really not going to make a difference. But depending on your preference, like I said, you can do the open top way, or you can do the crimp way where you have to crimp it back. Alright, now the how-to, and then we'll get into the materials in just a minute. The how-to, we used to do them out of crayons, and crayons are fine. I mean, I have nothing against using crayons or candle wax. And once you use this, this is pretty cheap. I got this 24 crayons for $1 at the Dollar General store. So this will make pretty much the same amount of wax slugs. So you can make about 24 wax slugs, one per crayon. When you do this, obviously you're going to remove the paper from this. And once you remove the paper, you will need a dish that you will set on top of a heat source. It can be a stove, it can be a regular fire, depending on your dish. You'll set your crayon without the paper in there, and it'll start to melt and form a liquid. And once it forms that liquid, once your crayon forms that liquid, you'll take your shot and you'll pour it in with the melted crayon, and we're going to pretend this is melted. You'll have your liquid in here with the crayon. You'll stir it and get the shot all liquidy. Then once you have that liquid, you will scoop it out like this, liquid and shot together, and pour it back into your shell. And then once it gets to the top, you're done. And you set it aside to cool. Same thing with this one. Once you get to the top, you're done. Let it sit, let it cool, and then you'll crimp it back. And it's that easy. Now, that's the crayon way. There are other mediums that I discussed as well, and we'll go over those real quick. And those are very, very simple and easy as well. That was with the crayon. You can use school glue, Elmer's, or whatever you want. You can use hot glue. I don't have a hot glue stick, but you have to obviously have a hot glue gun for that. You can use regular silicone caulking. So what you're going to do is, I'm just going to choose this one at random just because I had it in my hand. School glue. You will, let me pour this back out, pour my shot back out. Alright, you will pour a small layer at the bottom and let it sit for a minute. Then take your spoon and pour some shot in, a little bit more glue, a little bit more shot, a little bit more glue, a little bit more shot. And what you're doing is you're layering it up, glue shot, glue shot, glue shot, until you get to the top where it's flat. Then you set it down and you're done. Same way with the crimp one. So you just pour it, glue shot, glue shot, glue shot, until it's, and you're done. And you let it sit, you let it cool, this one you just let harden since it's glue. And the same way with the hot glue. The hot glue, you pour a layer, then shot, then layer, then shot, until it gets to the top. Then you just let it cool and harden, and that's it. Now, the same way is with your silicone. Silicone is you pour a small base layer, put in some shot, a little bit more shot, a little bit more shot, until you get to the top and you're done. Same way with the other one. And that is all there is to how you do that. So here's the important part. Which one to use and which is the most economical for the purpose. I'm glad you asked that. Very economical, but it has a low melting point. And if you have a black shotgun that sits in the sun on a hot summer day, especially here in Tennessee, this is going to melt. And you do not want it to melt inside your tube or inside your shotgun. So that's why I went away from crayons or candle wax or paraffin, because of the low melting point. And you say, well, what is the melting point? Well, anywhere from, they say, 90 degrees to 110 degrees. And I don't know about you, but we break the 110 degree heat index here in Tennessee all the time in the summer. So, can you use this? Absolutely. If you live in a colder place where you're not going to have to worry about 110, 105 degree weather, then that's your option right there. That's a very good, inexpensive option. Elmer's or school glue. Very good, very inexpensive, but the same holds true for school glue. According to research from Elmer's glue, that this has a very low melting point and low bonding release point. And what that means is, the higher the temperature, the more it releases the bond. So this has about 110 degrees to 120 degrees as well, that once it hits that high temperature, the bond starts to release. And so what that would mean is it wouldn't come out as a slug. It would just come out as regular old splatter bird shot with glue chunks. So, like I said, if you're in a colder environment, this is a very good and inexpensive option. Low melting point, low melting point. So that left us with the silicone. And the silicone, I bought this for $5. You can see $4.49 right there is the price. Very inexpensive, and I could probably get several boxes of birdshot rounds to use for this. The melting point for this is about 220 degrees. So this has a very, very, very good, it resists heat a whole lot better than any other option. Now there are options like the hot glue, which I don't have present, but the hot glue gun has a very high melting point as well. But I don't have a hot glue gun, and you are dependent on having a hot glue gun, and you're having to be dependent on an electric source. You have to plug it in to heat it up, and with this you don't need anything electric. You just have your caulking gun, pour it straight in there, and you're done. So I would recommend the caulking. If you live in a place like Tennessee or South, you will need this because it gets awfully dang hot and awfully dang humid, and this is probably the best way to go and your least expensive way to go. So I hope that cleared up some things for you about wax slugs, on how to do it, what to use, and why. And I think this is going to be your most economical solution. If you live up in, say, like Michigan or whatever, you may want to use these because you don't have to worry about the hot temperatures melting these mediums. You may want to consider making wax slugs, because it may come to a point where these are going to be very, very, very difficult to find and very, 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 very expensive. So if you wanted to go deer hunting or whatever, you can deer hunt with a wax slug, and you'll get pretty good accuracy up to 30-40 yards. When you start getting into the 40, especially 50 yard, your accuracy is diminishing very, very, very much. So that being said, I recommend you start making wax slugs. Self-protection, home protection, awesome, awesome, awesome. You won't have to worry about over-penetration. Save these for dire emergencies. This is becoming very hard to find, very expensive. Save these and start making these. So here you can see I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with the school glue and 1 with the caulking, and 6, and you can see how much glue right to there where my thumb is. That's how much glue I've used, and I actually spilled some when I opened it. So that much of school glue can make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds. So I would bet, say, I'd say that'd probably do about 24, 25 rounds for one. This is 5 fluid ounces. And 1 thing of caulking, that's a 10.5 ounce tube, will probably yield probably about the same, probably about 20 rounds or so. It's a box of bird load. So this is why you should consider doing wax slugs, for the awesome explosiveness that it has when it hits something, the non-over penetration, and it's very inexpensive to do. You saw it here on the Poboy Special channel.